Simplest measure of where we are in a language is how many words we know. Hi there, Steve Kaufman here again to talk about language learning, and today I'm going to talk about vocabulary. Remember, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe. You can click on the bell for notifications, and come and join me at Link. And speaking of Link, I'm going to talk a little bit about my vocabulary at Link. I'm going to do some analysis of my vocabulary because I believe that the fundamental, the simplest, I called it like back 15 years ago, I called this sort of the Gordian knot. Simplest measure of where we are in a language is how many words we know. And I mean passively. I mean recognizing words in a context. I don't mean necessarily being able to use them, because that develops slowly, and it develops as we have the opportunity or the need to use the language. But we need to have this passive vocabulary to build up our familiarity with the language so that we can access interesting content, read interesting content, watch movies, engage with people in interesting conversations. We need the passive vocabulary. So that's what I measure. So I decided to have a look at where I stood on Link. First of all, a quick review of my stats for this past week. You'll see that, I open this up here, that I added 500 new known words. I created 652 links. That's to say I met words that I didn't know, and I added them to my database. Of the links in the known words area, 447 I actually learned, like I moved them to known. And others are words that I simply didn't look up because I could tell what they meant, because I have learned other words that are very, very similar. Could be different forms of the word. So that's my status for the week. If I now look at the sort of my all-time status or statistics, you'll see that I have 19,211 known words. Again, words that I know passively. I can't use 19,000 words in Arabic. I struggle when I speak with my tutor, as you're going to see when I do my exit video with my tutor next week. And we might even make that a live stream, or at any rate, I will, make a video which will be available on YouTube. However, I do have 19,000 passively known words, but I have 57,000 links, words and phrases that I have saved. So I really know a small subset of all the words that I have saved. I know a third of them. So there's 2/3 that I've met, looked up, and no longer know what they mean. So I wanted to do a little more analysis of this. So what I did was I sort of went into the vocab section, and there, you initially look at, if you look at the status, it has every one of the 4 or the 5 statuses are ticked off. So the total number of vocabulary that I have saved, the total number of my created links is 56,970. Okay? Now, I can go and change the parameters. So let's, for example, say that I go into my vocab section and I choose only status 1. So I tick the others, I get rid of the others. I'm only going to look at status 1 words. Well, it shows me here that 36,500 of my 57,000 saved links, I hope I'm not confusing you, but the bulk of the words that I have met and looked up in a dictionary are still status 1. In other words, new. So those are words that haven't shown up again, or I don't remember them, or whatever. So I went into my status 1 words and found that actually there were a lot of words there that I actually knew or I had some familiarity with. So I went into my list and started upgrading them to status 2 or status 3 or even known. Now, that's not a tremendously useful thing to do in a way, because if there are words there that I know, and if they show up again, I have an opportunity while I'm in the lesson page to upgrade them, to move them to status 2 or status 3 or make them known. So to do this, in a concentrated fashion in the vocab section, you got to weigh that versus being in a lesson, new material, the language, you're hearing it, you're reading it. Should you be doing that, or should you be working with your vocabulary list? So this is a question we all have to decide. But in a way, it's fun to do this because it's a different kind of activity. The other thing, of course, is in most languages, if you organize or if you list them in where it says sort by, if you list them alphabetically, and that's going to mean different things in different languages, but you're going to end up getting 4 or 5 forms of the same word, or 4 or 5 words that have the same starting component. And that can be very helpful in terms of solidifying your grasp of the word. So I kind of enjoy spending some time on my lists. Now, what's interesting is, if I look at the distribution of my vocabulary, that is of my saved links, there's 57,000 of them, 64% are status 1, the overwhelming majority. Status 4 and 5, that is words that I've now moved to known, is the next largest group. And there are very few in status 2 and status 3. Now, there are a number of reasons for this. A lot of people, and I myself included, I'm not sure what's the purpose of status 2 and status 3. Like, either I know it or I don't know it. But lately, I've kind of changed my attitude, and I say I should be moving more to 3, because whatever is in status 3, those are words that I'm not entirely sure of, but I'm getting close to where I think I can recognize them. And so I'm now much more inclined, whether with a list or while I'm doing a text, I'm more inclined to move words up in status manually to 2, and eventually to get to 3. Because what I do now, from time to time, I go in there to status 3 words, and I move to known the ones that I now feel I know. Bearing in mind that some will move back in status, because a couple of weeks later now you don't know the word. That's fine. The statistics adjust, and it's not important. Now, the point is that, why do this? Well, one thing is, when you go to select your lessons, here we have 14% new words. So that's a useful number. It tells you how difficult this is going to be. So, the status, obviously, and so the page looks like this, right? So I got a bunch of blue words that I'm going to look up, some of which I may even know, and I might move them to status 4 or known right away. Or I've always got the opportunity to move them up in status as I read. So then the question is, so you're going to move them up to status 3 in order to go in there and pick up whatever words you think you know to bump up your statistics. Why do that? If those words, let's say there's a bunch of words that you know buried in your status 1, buried in the sort of words that are new, and it hasn't shown up, but you've seen other words similar to that, so that these words now are in fact known. So if I then go in there, find them, make them known, it makes my statistics look better. However, probably if I kept reading and listening, I would eventually find those. So, it doesn't, because I move them to known, doesn't make them known. Either they're known or they're not known. So if my statistics are saying that I know 19,000 words and there's another 1,000 words buried in number 1 or 2 or 3, in reality, it doesn't matter. But it is fun. And it is fun to go through the lists and look for the words you know, or you think you're getting closer to knowing. While you're doing that, you're comparing them to words that are similar. It's a bit of a reminder. And if you have a specific task, like moving them from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, from 3 to known, it gives you another very sort of specific, practical thing you can do that makes it more interesting to go through the lists. So that it's not just I want to remember this word. No, the task is moving them in status. So you are being exposed to them again. You're doing this specific, task. You're not telling yourself, I must learn this, because that's not very effective. So I just thought I would pass this on as something that I've been experimenting with, and be interested in hearing your comments. A little bit confusing, no doubt. Bye for now.